Romantic relationships are the cores of so many stories, and even if they're not at the center of your plot, they can still play an important role in your characters' lives. So today, in honor of The Dragon Prince Season 7, which just came out recently, I'm going to be talking about 3 of the romantic relationships that shape that universe: Rayllum, Janaya, and Clauderry, and what we, as writers, can learn from each of them in turn. So without further ado, let's get started. Sup peoples, and welcome back to another video. I am so excited about the new season of The Dragon Prince. Feel free to discuss it in my comments, and I'll be happy to share my thoughts and just generally geek out about it. I love that show so much you will not even believe. It is like a hyperfixation at this point. Do mark things with spoilers if possible though, so that people who haven't watched it yet can avoid them. Speaking of spoilers, this video will contain spoilers for The Dragon Prince Season 7 and all the other seasons. So, alright, with all of that out of the way, let's begin. Janai and Amaya have one of my favorite relationships in the show. A lot of times in media we're shown healthy and unhealthy dynamics, but what The Dragon Prince does so well is showing that healthy relationships can have bad moments too. That nothing is black and white, everything is just shades of gray. So that's what I wanted to talk about with Janaya, how a healthy and good relationship can navigate the bad times. As a comparison, let's take Lumity from the Owl House. Now, I want to preface this with the fact that I adore the Owl House to pieces, and I love Lumity. This is not me saying that the ship or the show are bad. They're just different and are a good example of what I'm talking about in this case. Both Luce and Amity and Janai and Amaya have enemies to lovers arcs. Amity bullies Luce, and Janai and Amaya are on opposite sides of a war. This helps to make them a good comparison for one another. But once they become partners, that's where the difference becomes apparent. With Luce and Amity, once they start dating and the bullying is put behind them, no more conflicts really come up between them. They don't bicker or argue, and while they both have things to work through, they are never again in opposition. However, with Janai and Amaya, that isn't true. Amaya is culturally insensitive in Season 4 and doesn't treat Janai's way of life with respect. However, she sees the error in her ways and admits this, asking for a chance to do better. And in Season 6, Janai is burdened by the weight of being queen and lashes out at Amaya as a result. But Amaya is patient with her and helps her to find hope again. In this way, Janaya has something that Lumity lacks: issues within the established relationship. Again, to be clear, this is not me saying that Lumity is bad because it lacks this. I chose Lumity as an example ship because it's good and a wonderful relationship, and I love those characters very much. I think it's important to say that there is no one way to write, and I love both ships. I just wanted to point out that this is something that the Dragon Prince add to all of its relationships, whether romantic or platonic. The characters fight and they argue and they treat each other poorly at times, whereas a lot of times in media that's only seen in unhealthy relationships. In The Dragon Prince, it also features heavily in healthy relationships, and I think that's realistic because people fight and they bicker and they make mistakes. One of my favorite scenes in Season 4 was Amaya's speech during the tribunal, where she admitted that she was being insensitive and asked for a chance to be better and for the compassion of the Six Horns and Janai. I thought it was so much more impactful that way than if Lucia, who had been the one to initially violate the Sunfire Elf ritual, was shown to be just a bad guy. That simplifies it too much. I appreciated that Amaya felt that Lucia hadn't done anything wrong at first because she, too, didn't understand how important the ritual was. She initially didn't care to learn or think about it from the other side of things. So when she does put herself in someone else's shoes and chooses to learn and grow, it makes it even more meaningful. And I loved that in Season 7 she admitted that falling in love with Janai wasn't just about love either. It was also about putting in the work to overcome her own prejudices. And I appreciate that Janai lashes out at Amaya in Season 6 when she's feeling overwhelmed, because Amaya is there and she's trying to help. But that's exactly the point. She's there. It only makes sense that the people you'd lash out at when you're under stress are the people right there trying to give you solutions. But the important thing is that Amaya doesn't abandon Janai because of it. She's still right there and she helps Janai through it. So all of this is to say, your characters can bicker and they can make mistakes. Even big mistakes. That doesn't mean that the relationship is over or unhealthy. What makes it a healthy relationship isn't a lack of difficulty. It's how they're able to work through those hard times. And that's one of the things that Dragon Prince really does well and brings to all of its relationships. It shows us these healthy and unhealthy relationships and all of the similarities between them and the parallels, and honestly it treats them pretty much the same except for how the characters act. I would say that every single relationship in The Dragon Prince, whether healthy or unhealthy, faces its hurdles, and what shows whether it's healthy or unhealthy is how they're addressed, not that there are hurdles. So the main takeaway for me with Janaya as a writer is that when you're writing a healthy relationship, you shouldn't be afraid to have the characters still make mistakes and still treat each other poorly sometimes. It doesn't mean that they're bad people if they sometimes do bad things. So long as the relationship is strong enough and the characters care about each other enough to learn and grow and change and learn from those mistakes, that's really what makes it an intriguing and important and vital seeming relationship, is if they can grow together rather than just both being perfect and happening to date. Now that we've talked about healthy relationships, let's talk about Clauderry. This section will feature a lot of spoilers from season 7, just a heads up. With Janaya, I talked about a healthy relationship where the characters sometimes don't see eye to eye. With Clauderry, it's similar, but I wouldn't label the relationship as healthy. I would say that it's in the area of shades of gray. Yes, it has healthy elements, but there are certain aspects that are not healthy, as we saw in season 7. So why is this? What works about it and what doesn't? Why do Claudia and Terry work together, and what makes it so that they were destined to fall apart? Claudia and Terry are goofy and kind, though with Claudia, kind is not the only word I would use to describe her. She can be kind, but she can also be cruel. And this is, I think, where we start to see the issue. Terry is understanding of Claudia doing terrible things when it comes from a place of love. When she does an awful spell to save her dad, he can excuse it because she had a reason. But when she is needlessly cruel, when she does something out of spite or revenge, he can't stand by and watch that. Terry, in that same way, is able to excuse himself doing something awful if it means saving Claudia. It eats him up inside and he feels horrible about it, but he can justify the act because, to him, he had no choice. So long as Claudia only does terrible things because she has no choice, Terry can see past it. In this way, they are alike. They are fiercely loyal to their loved ones. But whereas Terry feels bad about having to do awful things, Claudia has steadily become more and more callous about it. Dark magic makes you view living beings as parts, and she voices this. But it's not just magical beings that she's started to view as parts. This worldview inevitably seeps into the wider world, and in this way, Claudia starts to use people the same way she might once have used spell ingredients, as a means to an end. She needs pushing to get to this place, and she has reservations, but she still does it. So this is the thing on Claudia's end that will eventually tear them apart, this ideological difference. But what about them works? What about them is refreshing? Because their relationship is really sweet and meaningful, and I do think they work well together. It's not just unhealthy. And I think that's because Claudia has spent her whole life with people telling her what to do, telling her what truth is, even when it's just actually their version of truth, telling her what right and wrong are, even when it is, again, their subjective versions of it. And Claudia ends up needing this. She looks for people to tell her what to do, to give her direction, to give her purpose. But Terry never takes advantage of that. He never guides Claudia in the direction that would best suit himself. Instead, he's one of the only characters in the show that asks Claudia what she wants, and that says he'll stand beside her no matter what choice she makes. Now, I think that this is good and bad. It's good because Claudia needs to find her own way, and Terry is one of the few people willing to stand by her as she does that. It's good because it would be so easy to direct Claudia in one direction or another. She even asks him to, but he refuses. He wants her to be able to decide for herself. But on the other hand, this is bad because he's following Claudia wherever she goes, however dangerous and however vile that place may be. And eventually, she was bound to go someplace that even he couldn't follow. In the end, she does. Claudia's path leads her someplace that Terry can't follow. Not because he doesn't love her, he still does, but because he doesn't want to become someone that he can't recognize. He realizes that even though he will always love Claudia, if he follows her down this path any further, he won't be able to love himself anymore. And that is because Claudia uses him. Their relationship was always built off of Claudia doing terrible things but telling him why. And because he believed in her reason, he believed in her. But in the Garden of Innocence, she lies to him and tells him half-truths. She keeps things from him and, in a way, uses him for parts. She takes advantage of his true heart. When he finds out Terry is rightly horrified, saying that this isn't how you treat someone you love. It's not how you treat anyone, and he has to leave for himself. But that he will always love her. And even later, when they face each other from opposing sides of the battlefield, he's not trying to hurt her. He's trying to help her find herself. He still believes that she can stop herself and choose the right path. In a way, he's finally taking a more active role in their relationship, even if they did have to break up for him to be able to do that. Because before then, Terry tended to take a passive role, trying to ease Claudia's burdens and worries, but not actively guiding them down any one path. That was always Claudia's job. But now he's trying actively to help Claudia find a different path. So, all that being said, what can we as writers take away from this? First of all, relationships are complicated. They can be full of love and still unhealthy. They can be healthy and unhealthy at the same time, even. Choices you make can have good and bad consequences. For example, Terry and Claudia love each other. But I would say that Terry's love for Claudia blinds him at times to the path she's chosen and is leading him down too. And I would say that Claudia uses love as an excuse to do terrible things. In a similar way, Terry wanting Claudia to choose her own path is a good thing, especially given the fact that most people in her life had taken advantage of her need for direction. However, it still means that he ends up playing a supporting role in their life and that Claudia is left with a greater chance to take the wrong path. Would choosing the path for her have been right? No, I don't think so. But that still doesn't mean that his more passive role in their relationship was 100% good. A good decision can have bad results, and a bad decision can have good results. Another thing that I think is important to think about is judgment. Throughout the show, Claudia notices that other characters, namely Callum, judge her for what she does and her use of dark magic. So when Terry leaves her and tries actively to stop her, she accuses him of judging her. However, he states that he doesn't judge her, he loves her. And I think that is important as well. I mentioned Terry taking a more passive role in their relationship, but now he's taking an active one. Him leaving wasn't a sign that he doesn't love Claudia anymore. It was just the only way forward that he saw after she used him in that way. He still loves her. He doesn't judge her, but he's taking action now, and that action led him away from her. Yes, they broke up, but Terry still has hope for her when most of the other characters don't. He left for himself, not because he no longer cares about her. So instead of just thinking about how a character's negative traits can be balanced out by others' positive traits, or how their negative traits may conflict, also think about how their positive traits may conflict. Terry doesn't want to tell Claudia what to do. That is a positive, but it ends up having a negative effect because of Claudia's own leanings. So the main takeaway from their relationship really is just that two people who love each other and are trying to do good by each other can still mess up. A relationship full of love can still be toxic. Unhealthy relationships can have sweet, tender moments. I would say that Clauderry is one of the sweetest relationships in the show, and yet they're the villains, and they do terrible things to each other and to the world around them for one another. So when thinking about relationships, don't just think about, well, how is this character good and bad? Think about how these characters might be neither, how they're both, how every single person in every single relationship and every single situation is good and bad. No one is just bad. No relationship, well, maybe some, but most relationships aren't just bad. And even a really toxic, unhealthy relationship that's inevitably doomed can have really sweet moments where people are trying their best for one another. Now, speaking of breakups, let's talk about Rayllum. Not that they're broken up anymore. It's just the best segue I could find. They are quite definitely not broken up anymore, in fact. If you're a Dragon Prince fan, then you're probably a Rayllum fan. Their relationship is central to the plot. And for that reason, I wanted to talk about the plot with them. Let's start in season 1 with challenging one another's worldviews. When Callum meets Rayla, he believes that elves are bloodthirsty monsters, but she challenges this view. She makes him, and by extension us, the viewers, grow to view things as more complicated. Once again, the Dragon Prince is all about how things are not so black and white. And it's the same with Rayla's views of human being challenged by Callum. And because of this, they push one another along in their character arcs. And that's one of the things that's so interesting about Rayllum as a ship. They're central to the plot and one another's character arcs. When Rayla meets Callum, she believes that justice is an eye for an eye. That's what she's been taught, and the mission she was sent to Katalis to fulfill. But Callum challenges it. He asks how killing Ezran for the death of the Dragon Prince is justice. He points out that all she's really doing is continuing the cycle of violence, and that sticks with her. It stays with her throughout her character arc, and it helps her find what she wants to do with her life and who she wants to be. Callum and Rayla are a good fit right off the bat, because they challenge one another and force each other to grow and evolve into better versions of themselves. So this leads me to the main point I want to talk about with them: interconnected character arcs. Callum and Rayla meet at the beginning of, and you might even say cause, one another's character arcs. When Callum points out Rayla's flawed justice, he starts her character arc. And you could say that Rayla calling Callum a mage starts his. And as the main characters, their arcs are central to the plot. So that means their relationship is also central to the plot. So all of this is to say, The Dragon Prince might not be a romance, but romance is still pretty important in it. For example, let's break down all the ways that Rayla's relationship with Callum affects her, and in turn, the plot. First off, Rayla is sent to kill the princes. She was taught that this is justice. But when Callum points out the cycle of violence that she's perpetuating, she comes to question if her carrying out her mission will actually change things, or if he's right. So then, when they find the egg of the Dragon Prince, she's more motivated to bring it back with them, rather than on her own, because she sees how it could change things and end that cycle of violence. Rather than just showing up as the hero who got the Dragon Prince egg, she wants to have them, the human princes, return it and break the cycle of violence. You might say her life took on new meaning. If you get that reference, you are awesome and should be proud of your level of nerdiness, and if you don't, go stream the Dragon Prince again. Anyway, this is the start of Rayla's character arc, and Callum continues to affect her and it. In season 2, when she goes to save the dragon, she quotes what Callum said about breaking the cycle. And she also says that it doesn't just feel like the right thing to do, but it feels like the right thing for her to do. Callum's words helped her find a new purpose. And then in season 3, Callum calls her a hero and talks about how she always does what's right, even if it means she's at risk of being misunderstood. He, once again, affirms her character arc. Also in season 3, when she's faced with her parents' mistakes once again, he helps her to move past them by showing her that her parents didn't run away, and therefore opens up her options in her mind. And she decides that they should decide what to do next together. Callum plays a really big role in Rayla's character arc, though I would personally argue that it's not completed yet, so that's why we need Arc 3. Everyone go and rewatch The Dragon Prince. Get those watch time hours up and use the hashtags #GiveUsTheSaga and #ContinueTheSaga to get us that mythical third arc. But anyway, back to the video. Because Callum and Rayla's relationship is central to Rayla's character arc, it also means it's central to the plot. Because our main characters' character arcs are naturally going to affect and be affected by the plot. So what can we as writers learn from this? A story doesn't need to be a romance for romance to be central to it. The Dragon Prince is definitely not a romance, but that doesn't mean that relationships like those belonging to Amaya and Janai, Claudia and Terry, and Rayla and Callum aren't super important to it. Think about how your characters' relationships with one another are going to affect things. It's not like Rayllum is separate from Rayla and Callum. It's part of them, and they are part of it. Of course, Rayla is going to be influenced by Callum, and so of course that means Rayla's character arc will also be affected by him, and therefore their relationship, which also means the plot will be affected. It's like this spider web, everything is connected. So when writing a romance, think about the ways in which it will affect everything else, even if your story isn't technically in the romance genre. Don't write their love story as a subplot. Instead, write the effects into the very characters, and therefore character arcs. It will make your love story feel central and important rather than letting it get sidelined or making it feel disjointed and disconnected to the rest of the story. I hope this video helped you out and you learned something from it that you can take forward into your own writing. I absolutely love the couples in The Dragon Prince and think they're some of the best written ones I've seen in media to date. There's so much we can learn as writers from that show, and if you'd be interested in a video on how to make your characters shippable, let me know in the comments, and I can potentially talk about some non-canon Dragon Prince ships and why they have fans. Yes, it would be an excuse for me to talk about Sorvus, that is really what it is, but until then, happy writing, I hope this video helped, and I will see you on the next page. Till then.